Number one item is the discussion on Northern Integrated Supply Project NISP.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. We have another the next iteration of our work sessions on the NISP, the Northern Integrated Supply Project, and the city's participation in that project. We've had lots of discussion. For slides tonight, we'll be brief on the background, but the council's direction at the last meeting, toward the end of the discussion, there was some direction to kind of focus in, hone in on participation levels between, I guess, 1,600 and 0 acre feet, with some thought that 1,000 or 1,200 might be a place to resume conversation. So that's where we've done some additional modeling on rates tonight, what they could be with all the uncertainties that entails. We do have all of the assumptions in the staff report. And with that, I will ask Jessica Gonifas to just summarize the information, and then we'll certainly ask for council's discussion. I will mention it's important, if we can, to have direction from council on this item tonight if possible. The Northern Water Conservancy District, who's managing NISP, is starting to put the wheels in motion for the debt issuance on the first piece. It's a small debt piece, but nevertheless, they really need to know the various agencies' commitment levels. So if it's possible, we'd like to land tonight, but it's a very important conversation, important policy issue, so council needs to take its time. With that, Jessica?
Yeah, good morning, or good evening, morning, council. So we've been talking about this since August 6th. We had several work sessions on it, really working through different scenarios and comparisons. So tonight we have a couple more options for you to look at. Just a quick recap. The cost components, it's about $48 million of the raw water, so part of the larger NISP project, which is we are committed right now at 4% or 1,600 acre feet. We are estimating operations and maintenance expenses also in the models, and then some participation in a regional treatment plant, so we would have capacity to treat the water when it did come online. So we did make an adjustment to the model since you saw it last. So we had a placeholder of around $250,000 in there a year related to the Greeley cap that we would want to make sure we had saved up in case we did exceed our cap. And that really came off as a priority level off of the system development fees, and then left what there was available to help fund NISP. And we did look at our models and look at the usage right now and decided that a more conservative number would be in order. So we really allocated 25% of all those system development fees now to the Greeley cap. So what that did was allow us to potentially accumulate more funding if we did need to pay that, and allowed a little bit less cash then to fund the NISP project. So that was the major change we had. We've narrowed it down to one growth estimate, so you've seen a few different levels over the last several months, but we're really looking at what we were calling the higher level, which now we believe is going to be really probably what we do see through the growth period. So we modeled 1,000, 1,200 acre feet, and then we have the 1,600 acre feet there for comparison also, since we did change the model a little bit related to those system development fees. So the rate we would be looking at over the, basically in 2034, we believe would be around $28 per household for the 1,000 acre feet, $35 for 1,200 acre feet, and then $48 for 1,600 acre feet. So just a little graph to see how the 1,200 and the 1,000 compare, since those are the new pieces that we're showing you tonight. For each year. So we did use the smoothing method. So although the rate increase doesn't have to be in place for probably the 3 years, we did smooth that out, so it was more of a gradual increase for the residents instead of all at once.
Sorry, can you call out what those?
Oh, sure.
Give me a
Yeah, we also have the table in your packet that shows the detail of what the actual numbers are. But at the 1,000 acre feet, you're looking at around $3 on average, probably for the first 4 years per month. And then you drop down to around $2. And then you go back up again to around $3.50 for a few years because of the treatment plant when that gets added in. At the 1,200 acre feet, you're around $3.50 for the first few years, and then you drop down to about $2.75, and then back up to about $4.25. So that information in your packet has more detail there. And then that compares to if we continue with our full level of participation at 1,600 acre feet, we're at about $5-ish on average for the first few years. And then that drops down to about $3.25, and then back up to about $5.70. So that's what those rate increases would potentially look like. So as Jim mentioned, there is a financial commitment coming up on us fairly quickly. By June, they would like the NISP plans on having the allocation agreement signed, so, and through the city councils or the participants councils. And then also they have decided to do a line of credit for the first piece of debt, so they will need that to also be through all the communities by June as well. So we are still working on whether a rate increase would need to be in place by the time you approve the line of credit debt agreement. Legal is working through that, and they have a meeting this week. So we will know more, hopefully after this week, whether a mid-year type rate increase would be needed or not.
So with that, again, if council could provide some direction on the level of participation, that is kind of where we are. So with that, Mayor, we'd be glad to.
I have one question. I know Windsor, I don't know whether I read it in the Tribune or whether I heard it from someone, is also doing something similar. They're in NISP as well,
Yeah.
and they're raising their rates. Do we know how, have they decided on a rate structure for theirs, or?
They've raised their rates twice this year. I can't speak for certain if they were both for NISP particularly, but NISP was a topic and was part of at least one of them. So they're certainly looking at what their costs will be, and they are making moves. We are hearing that other agencies in the area are also starting to talk about potential rate increases. So
the reason I bring that up, when we saw that graph and it looked like we were going to be one of the higher ones, at that moment in time we were, but I think all those, not all of them, but a lot of the other cities that were on that graph are going to be doing the exact same thing. I think they're going to be moving up as well. So, questions or comments for staff?
I did talk to Mayor Melendez a little bit at our MPO meeting, and we did discuss water. Seems like they are participating in NISP. And I know that they are looking to build their water portfolio tremendously to ensure that they have, water for future growth and development as well. Comments? I mean, I know I spoke that I'm still in favor of the 1,600 acre feet of water. I mean, I know that, some of us have disagreements on it. Looking at the difference between the 1,000 and the 1,200, if we need a compromise, I would go along with the 1,200 acre feet. There's not a big significant difference between the rates for the 1,000 and 1,200. My concern is just to make sure that we are protecting the city, in the future, making sure that all of our residents have enough water, for our continued growth and development. That's the one thing I want to make sure. I know regardless of any action that we take, whatever we decide on for how much water to participate in, it's going to affect everybody. Whether you're on a fixed income, a family on a single, income, or a family with, dual incomes, it's going to impact everybody. I just want to make sure that we are looking at the long-term sustainability of the city. I mean, some of us may not live here in 10 years when this comes online, but there'll be a lot of people that will. And if we don't take any action now, those costs are only going to increase in the future. And those future residents, and even if some of us that are living here in that time period, which most of us probably will be, are going to see even larger rates increase. So I just want to make sure that we're, protecting our investment and protecting the city and our citizens as well.
All right.
I'm reading through this. The $40 million was estimated in 2012. Sorry, 2002. So the price is probably elevated since then. The cost of this project.
Actually gone up more than that.
No, in 2002, the total was 400 million, and now the total is 1.2 billion, and we're 4% of that.
Yeah.
So it has gone up, yeah.
Okay. I know that Windsor has increased their rates. I do want to point out that we do have a different demographic, and I'm sure you guys are aware of that.
No, absolutely. I was merely pointing out that we're not the only ones that are going to be
Yes,
doing that.
I'm still at 1,000. I don't want to penalize our current residents any more than we have to for future growth that may or may not happen. I know growth is inevitable, but I don't see why all of our residents that live here now, a lot of them on fixed incomes, a lot of them, you know, struggling to make ends meet. And, you know, we need to look out for the current citizens too, along with the people that will come here in the future. That's where my concern is at. And I know that water is very important. It's a valuable commodity. When we threw our name into the hat with this, I know we were all in at 4%. Sometimes you just need to realize that, you know, we went in for the maximum, and maybe we can't afford the maximum. We can't afford it. That's where I'm at. I'm at 1,000 because of affordability for the residents.
Councilwoman Finn?
I'm also in at 1,000 acre-feet. I know the 1,600 was a dream. They also wanted to be in Windy Gap. They didn't take into account back then how we were going to pay for it. I know that it's just 22 cents a month more, but month after month, and we still don't know if Greeley's going to raise treatment rates. We have to consider all the possibilities of that. We currently have enough for right now, and I think 1,000 acre-feet we can tolerate, and I don't think it's going to be as damaging then to do with 1,600 acre-feet. So I just think we need to look at the fact that there's a possible growth, that it might not happen. There's an economic downturn that they're talking about happening. I know what happened in 2008, 2009, and for us to not be able to grow like we did during that time, and people suffer and not have the money to pay their bills, I can do 1,000. I just cannot, with good conscience, do 1,600.
Councilmember Neal, you had asked to go last, so I'm going to postpone you for just a second and move to you, Ms. Castle.
I am with Director Clark here. I believe that when I look at it, it's really difficult, and I completely agree with what Councilwoman Spear and Finn are both saying, that to look at it and know the impact on our residents is difficult. But I've seen firsthand the ramifications of not having a proper water supply, and that's bothersome to me, because what I would hate to do is truly burden our residents, current and future, by not making the right decision today and having an increased cost in the future. Because of that, I'm in line with the 1,200, and I can fully support that. It's a difficult thing, and I know that, and I fully understand the impact on our residents, but I also understand how important it is to have that supply, and I think it's critical to the success and future of our city.
I also agree with Councilmember Castle, and as well I see the perspective of Councilmember Finn and Spear. I like 1,200 just because it's a compromise between 1,000 and 1,600, and I think water is definitely a commodity that is required in order for us to grow. But if we don't have water, we don't have the opportunity to grow, and it's needed. And I mentioned before the median age in the city of Evans is, if you round up, it's 29. So in order for us to continue with that growth with, you know, the age group that we have, the demographics that we have, we need that water. We have a young demographic, and because of that, I believe that 1,200 would be the best and most reasonable amount.
Thank you. I concur as well. I'm in for the 1,200. I think the 1,600, there's not going to be more water. A few years from now, there's not going to be other places. This might be our last shot to get water. So I absolutely think we need it. The 1,600 acre feet, we're talking $2 more per month on average, sometimes a little bit more than that, between the 1,600 and the 1,200. All raising rates are never good, but if I'm looking at the 1,000 to the 1,200, that first year we're looking at 20 cents more to get 200 more acre feet of water. I get it, still 20 cents. I don't like raising anything by anything. But the smaller difference in I think we're going to get more bang for our buck at the 1,200 level than we do for 1,000. I am out for the 1,600 level. That's just too much to put onto our citizens. My recommendation is the 1,200 acre feet. So, Neil?
As a child growing up in Loveland 69 years ago, I was thankful for beautiful parks to visit for play, a ditch and lakes for fishing, a free swimming pool donated to the city by Andrew Carnegie, excellent museums, schools, and libraries. Occasionally, my grandparents, parents, and their friends would talk about the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl days, and how we should always honor, respect, and thank our World War I and World War II veterans for our freedom. In the early 60s, a beautiful new high school and public library were provided for my benefit. A dedicated 1% sales tax was passed to build and improve roads, which a classmate years later stated was one of the best uses of a tax he ever saw. What I did not realize at the time was the other things to be thankful for provided by these 60, 70, 80, and 90-year-old people who lived through the Dust Bowl days. In 1933, President Roosevelt provided the Civilian Conservation Corps and employment for hundreds of thousands of young men, including Walter Matthau, Raymond Burr, Stan Musial, and Chuck Yeager. The CCC worked to improve thousands of parks, state and national, rivers, lakes, and create new parks and water storage reservoirs. In 1937, President Roosevelt authorized the Bureau of Reclamation to start work on the 20-year Big Thompson project, which my father helped build. Wait a minute. Evans' only source of treatable water comes from the Big Thompson project and much of Grievance. Where would Evans be if these 60, 70, 80, and 90-year-old people who had lived through such hard times had said, I can't afford it, like past Evans City councils, or the often heard, let the next council deal with it. Amazing how taking positive construction action now can benefit unknown future generations. Those citizens who had the least motivation based on age to provide higher taxes for future needs were still motivated and took responsibility to try to provide a better future for succeeding generations. As the oldest person on this city council, I have the same motivation and responsibility to provide a better future for the succeeding generations, as do the mayor and 3 city council members for their small children. Mr. Mayor, under your leadership, let us be the council that finally takes responsibility and deals with the future needs of this city. Time stands still for no one, and change comes daily.
Thank you, Fred. So I'm very well spoken. Was that mean you're in for the 1,600 acre feet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I was kind of getting at. So Jim and staff are kind of looking for recommendations. So far, I'm hearing 3 at the 1,200, 2 at the 1,600, and 2 at the 1,000 mark. I don't want to make it 3 to 2 to 2. Is there any other comments or any other decisions that would get us to a better decision for Jim or staff, or is everybody kind of where they're at?
I would just say if you look at the difference between the 1,000 and the 1,200, the rate increases, they're very minor. They're not very large, significant increases. That's 1,200 feet is kind of at the 75% point. I believe that would probably give us a more advantage for the future versus the lower amount of the 1,000. That's just my opinion.
Anyone else?
I think what Jessica pointed out with the cost in 2002 versus today really points to why I believe personally, professionally, as a councilwoman, that 1,200 acre feet is really securing our future. I was at the 1,600 for a long time, but Mayor Rudy, I appreciated what you said last time about really having to look at that impact on our residents. And upon further thought, I feel like 1,200 is a good compromise. Like I said, it's a struggle for me because I have seen firsthand with the large amount of water clients I work with, the impacts of those that have not secured water and the cost to their residents currently, and their rate increases are astronomical. So I want to be, as Fred said, really just that council that secures the future. And because of that, I'm really firm on the 1,200.
What else?
I'm just going to say that I am still at the 1,000, but I do appreciate there being 4 people that are willing to compromise. And the compromise is certainly very helpful, and I would be happy with that.
Okay.
Just to give direction, since we're all going towards the 1,200, I guess that's where we need to go. Okay. Because we need to move forward. We can't just stay there, and we can't just dicker on 20 cents a month. I get that. But I don't believe there's going to be any donors step up for it. And unfortunately, in this day and age, the citizens are the ones that's going to have to pay for it. And like I said, I do know that back when we jumped into Windy Gap and NISP, we had no plan on how it was going to be paid for. We just knew, I don't know, they thought Andrew Carnegie would come back, who they thought. But it was going to happen, and I don't know where it was going to come from, but it was not as planned as it should have been, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think this is definitely a hard conversation to have because we're trying to keep in mind both sides. You know, one side being the people that are the demographic that is on a fixed income. The other is, you know, the other, securing our future generations and making sure that we're able to also compete with, amongst other cities, as well as grow as a city and continue to grow. And we require water for that. But the fact that we're all compromising and then that we're having this discussion and that we also are taking into account every side is great.
I would agree with that as well. And, that's one thing that's always been great about this council. We can always have open, honest discussions, and we can always come to a good compromise and do what's best for the city. So I always appreciate that fact from everybody.
Yep. Jim, I think you got your number. I think we're on the 1,200. So if you could bring us back something with 1,200. Yep. I think that's the number we settled on. Again, I want to echo Mark's statement. I think this council works really well together. The open dialogue is what gets us to the right place, to a smart place. So thank you all for your involvement.
Thank you, Council. Good direction. Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is Riverside Park supplemental improvements. Mr. Stone, we'll start with you, Jim.
Thank you. As Brian makes his way up, I would just frame this conversation. We opened the park last fall, Riverside Park, and at the time, as we were closing out the project, there were financial reasons to take a couple components of the project out of the project with that contractor and bring them back this year. So that's what we're doing tonight. Those items were really the sod for some athletic fields and some overflow parking. We now also know how the budget for that project settled out. We actually have About $395,000 left from the money that was set aside for that project. We also have several months of experience, and the staff has, I think, done some good work to come back to you with some recommendations for things that we feel would really finish off the park and save us some money in the long term on a few things for maintenance, and also make it that much nicer for our visitors. So with that, I'll ask Recreation Director Brian Stone and also Operations and Parks Manager Scott Sanders to give an overview of those items and seek your direction to move forward with these investments.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rudy and members of council. Yeah, we are still super pleased with how the park turned out, and all the comments and everything that we're getting with this from tournaments and stuff coming in. But as we talked last fall, there were some things with the FEMA deadline, timing with sod and different enhancements that we wanted to finalize that we really did want to push to this spring. We still feel very strongly about trying to get these things done, especially with Heritage Day moving over there for the portion of the Friday night events and the fireworks that is moving forward right now. But like Jim mentioned, we've really noticed some things from the grand opening through our first tournament, and we've had 4 different tournaments scheduled out there. 3 of them have been canceled because of the weather, but for the most part, it's what we need, and with some minor changes. The police department has been fantastic. We have seen some vandalism out there. People have gone to the old soccer field and had some fun with some donuts and things. They actually caught that individual that did that, so we're looking at some restitution and things. We've increased signage. They've done some vandalism up on the concession building with just some small little graffiti. We've been actually very, very lucky, but we want to make sure that this amenity and gym that we have out there stays on the forefront, and that we can really make sure that we have our eyes on it at all times. So police department's been working with us with the camera systems and enhancing patrols. Scott and his crew have added more signs. But there's just a few things that we feel, as we've outlined this evening, that really can kind of to push us forward through that. So again, a couple of things that we had lined out last year was the sod and the parking lot improvements. We know that we need some overflow parking. We know that soccer field is a big draw for just special events, open turf for our baseball and softball tournaments, but also so we have a place where we can go play soccer and we can play flag football rather than our small parks in some of our neighborhoods. So the first part, just kind of the entry points, is the sod, the parking lot, and the signage. If you go into either side of the park, off of Riverside Parkway or 42nd, you don't even know you're really entering Riverside Park. So we'd like to do more of a grandioso entry sign with some rules so they know, hey, this is the park hours, and then follow posted signs kind of going from there. I hate to say park appearance because it's a beautiful park, but as you go along the trail system, there's still a ton of flood damage and snags that are down in hidden areas for safety that we would just like to get some of that debris removal. It'll help police department. We've had some camps kind of set up down there. Again, patrol's been down, Scott's crew's been down. So we're making some headway on it, but I think if we can clean that up and have better sight lines, we're gonna be better off moving forward with that. There is an old building restroom facility over by the lake as you come in off of 42nd. This structure's been there for a number of years. And Scott, correct me if I missed this here, but I believe in 2009, 2010, it was scheduled for demolition. That's when kind of the economy turned, so we utilized funds elsewhere. And then in 2013, it was also going to be removed in the fall, but then the flood came. It fell out of the flood waters, so water never actually reached it. And the reason we want to remove this structure is every time back when it was opened, it was vandalized all the time. Currently, the plumbing is so destroyed from people throwing in M80s, you name it. So we can't even camera the lines to see what we need to have fixed. So we'd have to break up the concrete and change plumbing. So we're looking at about an $80,000 investment for just going in and doing that. And we think with the restroom facility and maybe some portalets with some structures, we can address that need on that side of the park. With the addition of the sod for the soccer fields, we thought, okay, we have a beautiful trail and everywhere for the rest of the park, but can we put a trail around that so as kids are practicing, parents can still have eyes on their kids, keep them out of the mud, but have connectivity to the ball fields as well as the parking lot. So that's why you see the concrete work. The wetland maintenance and repairs, we're kind of tied to that. FEMA's, we have to show that we have established wetlands. With the destruction and the vandalism that we had with the kids going in and doing donuts and stuff is about $7,500 worth of repairs that we have to go in and do from grading and the type of seed that we have to put in. So large expenses, just want to make sure that we have the means to take care of that. And then the concession building, great facility, it's worked great. We didn't anticipate tournaments coming in February. So we had to turn on water because we had the lines and everything blown out. Well, now if we don't blow lines out, we have freezing pipes and lines. So we actually have some portable heaters in there now running on propane, just so we don't have staff time going in and making more efficient with our staff time. So, and then again, working with the police department, creating internet connectivity to that site will allow for our concession building to run, a phone line with security, but also we would work with the police department that they could have after hours with the new technology. If there's movement within the park, we can send something to a sergeant on staff, and they potentially, if they're not super busy, can run out and take care of the situation, trying to eliminate issues after hours at our park facility. So those are just kind of some of the highlights. Just kind of wanted to get some direction so we can do probably a preliminary budget revision here in that first week in April, because we really need to get the sod established so we're ready for the summer, but more importantly, our September event with Heritage Day.
Thank you, Brian. Questions or comments? Let's go around again. I'll start with Ms. Spear.
I appreciate all the work that you guys have done. And as mentioned, I've got several issues with some of these things. First of all, you're talking about the sod that was ruined with the vandals. Those people were caught. Is the city going through any kind of restitution to get any kind of monetary? Because I don't see why our nice, law-abiding, polite, courteous citizens need to be paying for the restitution that's done by the vandals.
Absolutely. So they were scheduled for court. They've been pushed, so we're trying to figure out, we didn't have a full cost estimate. So working through risk management, through city attorney, through our judge to make sure that we do get compensated back for those damages.
That get pushed because of the blizzard? There was no court last week?
Not really blizzard. We just didn't have enough answers for them because we didn't get our quotes, and we wanted to make sure we could cover as much cost as we could.
I just knew there wasn't court last week.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I know we have a city attorney. That'd be a good place to put that city attorney to work to get the restitution through the courts on that. Because if we're spending, what, $40,000 on some kind of camera system,
yeah,
and we just show up an hour after they have already vandalized something, you know, I would actually rather like to spend some money in some anti-graffiti paint. Have we looked into anti-graffiti paint? Sherman-Williams has really...
Coating is scheduled to go on as soon as we see temperatures that don't drop below 40 degrees at night. We purchased that out of the park's operating budget. We had it last fall, missed that temperature window. If we put it on when it's colder than that, it turns everything a milky white color. So, right. But we are ready to do that as soon as we get some decent light.
And we have a power washer. Huh? Okay, because that stuff comes right off with a power washer. There was you have on here too that you want to hire some people to come in and remove the rest of the debris that was there. I do believe that City Council approved 2 workers that were supposed to solely be in that park cleaning things up, and we had a very mild winter. How come none of that debris was cleaned up by our park workers?
We have cleaned up some of it, not all of it. One of those workers decided to take employment somewhere else already, so we're currently in recruitment, trying to fill that. But we have been out there most of the winter removing the stuff that we can. Some of the stuff that's left, we're talking big cottonwoods that are kind of beyond our scope. We don't have chainsaws.
Yeah, and I understand that, but there's a lot of piles that weren't. There's a lot of weeds and debris that weren't. That, you know, I figure if I could clean it off my property, that, you know, a city, I mean, I'm not exactly the strongest person in the world here. I mean, it would have been quite simple for a crew over the winter time. I think that also will help with the vandals too, is if we have more visibility in that park from our city staff. The restroom, I know that the 2013 flood didn't affect that, and being on the task force, we were told that there was actually plans on that restroom to make it more like renovated, like the village park restroom.
Okay.
And so now we're gonna tear this down. I mean, where are we expecting the people to go to the bathroom at? Are we going to provide porta potties? I mean, even the Pooter Trail has porta potties.
So that would be, again, we can look at it. We started to evaluate some new structures and what we did to Village Park. We're looking at about an $80,000 fix because of all the damage. We're basically bringing new plumbing into it. So we would probably look at pouring a pad, throwing a porta potty there, but then we're also looking at seeing if we can provide a structure over that so we don't have just a porta potty sitting out in the middle of a beautiful park. So we've looked at different options and we're fine going and looking at different things like that.
We can bring that back for council's, consideration if you'd like the cost of new restroom facilities.
I just want to know, I mean, it's a big park and people are using it. I mean, we still don't have trash cans there. We don't have doggy waste stations. None of that stuff is on there. I don't know who's been walking through the park, but you know, I go there once a week at least and walk through that park, and so do my neighbors, and I've had those questions.
So we'll look at putting additional out, but I know there is, if you go at trail entrances and different things and throughout, there are doggy bags out without, but we may need to add some more, and then we can look at adding some additional trash cans as well.
Okay. The last thing that I said, I just think that we need to make sure that we save some money aside, because I know from experience in the springtime when you get a lot of rain and snow runoff, that you tend to get drainage issues, and things fill in the wintertime. Things don't travel in the direction that you had thought they were going to travel, and I just want to make sure that we're spending our money wisely and have some money saved for some additional problems that might arise.
And I appreciate that, and really the big item we would like to get is the sod. Scott and I have also had discussions that we want to evaluate the park. Some of these things we think is the right direction, and everything that we have bids from Comcast all the way down to Verizon for some of that internet connectivity. This is the highest end that you guys will see. We're working with IT to find out what the best solution is, but a lot of these items we're going to evaluate and make sure that we're utilizing funds appropriately, and if it's not, then we will readdress later in the summer or fall and bring different items back to you rather than what's listed this evening.
And I just want to make one more point too. The most recent damage to some of the seated area on the off of the Pueblo and 40th Street entrance, I do notice that there's people now driving off of Pueblo into that area.
Over that burnt.
And so maybe it might be a good thing to look into a fencing there.
Yeah, great idea.
Or some big rocks or something.
No, I mean, it's along where there used to be a fence there when it was the CDOT's property. And, due to construction, it was taken down.
Off of Pueblo?
It's on Pueblo, going north from 40th to the first neighbor. on Pueblo. And I'm just trying to point out things.
Oh, that's great.
So that you guys do not live in that area are aware of. You get kind of both sides of the story. I mean, I do represent my neighbors. I do hear from them a lot. We do use the park a lot. So we have grave concerns. My concerns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Laura. Councilwoman Finn, anything to add?
I'm in support of getting rid of the restroom there. I think that encourages security issues. Homeless people want to go in there. I'd rather see portalettes in there than put in another restroom, because then you're going to have the same problem with that you have with the concession stand. You're going to have to run heat in there to keep the water from going, and it's just another opportunity for them to keep blowing it up. So, you know, portalettes, they kind of take responsibility away from us, but I would rather them look kind of nice, not the ones where they can tip them over and things. But I think that restroom needs to go, and might help with some visibility. I think that once we get a lot more activity down there, or people going in, I think that's going to kind of take care of some of the issues you've had. The internet, I think that's a good idea, especially if the police can be involved, where it gets triggered and they notice somebody down if they can.
Councilmember Neal, anything to add?
Will this cleanup on the additional cleanup help with mitigate any of the flooding, the spring, when we get the spring thaw down there, it just kind of get the junk out of the way so additional debris doesn't build up against it.
Yeah, we'll get rid of what's laying there, and clean things up. It's not gonna increase, it's not gonna do anything to stop any kind of flooding or any kind of mitigation.
The additional debris piling up against it.
Right.
And just kind of rechanneling the water a little bit. And I also think that some kind of camera system it seems like everybody's going to cameras everywhere. Look into it.
Councilmember Castle?
As it's in the budget, I'm great with the improvements as recommended. I mean, you two are the experts, and I appreciate the work you've done for sure. I think as a mother, the only things I would say was, first and foremost, I completely agree. I think SOD is the #1 priority. I think if my boy is playing soccer and thinking about going out there and playing is so advantageous, I think that's great. I love the idea of having a trail around. I appreciate removal of the restroom. I think that's critical. I would encourage, as we move forward, being a mother, particularly to a small child who's not potty trained, I would love to see if there was an option with a changing table. I know that's a small thing, but as a mom, that's a big deal always, and it's awkward to change your child, so then you're changing them in public. I know that's in the future, but just
so
food
we
for thought.
do currently have a family restroom at the concession, which does have a table. We'll hope it lasts and the vandals don't get to it, but we're going to do our darndest to keep that up.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Johnson?
I agree also with getting rid of the restroom, just for security issues, and also, you know, having small children, you know, just get rid of anything that will cause any unforeseen circumstances. But I agree. I thank you for all your hard work. I know that we're short-staffed, and you all spread yourselves very thin, and considering that, you do such a great job at what you do, and I am truly, truly grateful for what you do, and I appreciate you all. And SOD being just definitely the #1 priority, but I am in favor for this budget, and thank you.
Dude, I'm in favor of it. It's underneath our budget. We got money left over even after this, so I'm in favor of it. I think they're all great. I do agree with Council Member Finn. Bathroom, let's, you know, porta potty, but brick it off. So like she said, it's not just kicked over and nasty, but I'm all for it. It's all within budget. I think it looks great. So.
I would agree with that as well. You know, take down that restroom, put like a portalette or something, as well as the security cameras. and the other improvement projects. I think the security cameras are a fantastic idea. I mean, I know police are not going to be able to get there always and be able to apprehend or, you know, catch the individuals, but at least if you can have it on video, you can use that video to say, hey, have you seen this person, and eventually down the line get them. So I'm in favor of it as well.
But I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Spears' concerns as well, because it is, you know, her ward, and, you know, as council members, we should definitely support each other. And she knows, I mean, she's there constantly, and, you know, and she's able to, you know, give insight on what is needed and what her constituents would like to be done. So,
thank you, Councilmember Johnson.
Brian, does that give you some direction?
This is
on what
great,
you're
yes, so
looking for?
we'll bring a preliminary budget revision
Okay.
that first week in April, so we can get going on that sod, but it's gonna be a perfect time to do it, so.
Great.
Thank you for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next item on the agenda is policy discussion regarding allowing cannabis business. I do want to keep this to about 20-25 minutes, guys, because we do have something else we're going to do this evening, so we can.
It's okay.
No, we're going to do it. Jessica, it's all about you tonight. All about
I'm the
you.
one giving this presentation, so suddenly I feel like I have a lot to cover.
Thank you, Mayor. We can be on the brief side tonight, subject to council's questions. But just as an intro, at its January 15th work session, the council had a first discussion about potentially allowing cannabis businesses in Evans. They are currently banned. A moratorium was put in place several years ago as the state law evolved. I know some of the reasons cited for the conversation were that we've now seen several years of experience in the market has evolved. So it may be time just to consider it again. So you gave council some direction to look into the various policy questions. The staff report in front of you tonight points up a number of questions, probably 5 to 10 of them. Ranging from the types of marijuana businesses all the way through enforcement questions and taxes and those sorts of things. Our next step recommendation is that we get out in the community and have some neighborhoods, some town hall type meetings about this topic. I think in order for those to be most effective and get council the input that it may desire, if council could focus on just a few issues tonight and at least get us some direction so that we can be clear with the community about what the proposal or how this cannabis business environment might look like in Evans, that would be most helpful. And those questions really are the type of business, whether it's medical or recreational, the number of businesses, whether you'd like to limit that, and then also the land use regulation or spacing from other types of land uses. So with that, Deputy City Manager Jessica Gonifas has led our research on this topic, and we have this last time to ask her all the questions that we want to, but we are ready to carry the baton forward. But I will ask her to give an overview of the research areas and some of the particularly key policy areas so that we can have some council discussion this evening. Jessica.
If you would have asked me 12 years ago if my last presentation to you would be on cannabis, I would have said so here we go. A lot of things have happened in 12 years. So we have a little bit of history in the packet, and as Jim had mentioned, there currently is a moratorium, so we've been before you a couple times now talking about what this would look like if the city did decide to move forward. So one of the key questions we're hoping to get at least some general direction tonight that we could provide to the community in the town hall meetings is what types you would like to allow. So there is the medical side and then the retail side of the marijuana sales. And really the main difference between the two is at the state level, if you are over 18 but under 21, you can purchase the medical, and you have to be over 21 to purchase the retail. Now the city would have the ability to say you have to be 21 to purchase medical as well. So there are some communities that have decided to do that. The limit of what you can purchase on the medical side is quite a bit higher as long as you have the prescription from the doctor. So you could purchase up to 33 ounces at a time if that is approved by your doctor and with a prescription, as compared to the retail side is 1 ounce per transaction. And on the edible piece of the medical, there's really not a limit on the potency, and because it is for medical use, it can, and it usually is quite a bit more potent than what you're going to see on the retail side. So those are kind of the main differences between the medical and the retail. Also the taxing, the state caps it at the 2.9, the regular state sales tax on the medical side, but on the retail side it is the 15%. So for the city on the retail side, we do see that share back of 10% of the 15% on the retail side, although there wouldn't be a share back from the state on the medical side. So we would just get our local tax rate, which is currently the 3.5%. So that's one of the bigger pieces we'd like to hear from you tonight. So if you do decide to have the medical and the retail, you would have to decide if you would want to allow them to co-locate. So really what co-locating looks like is you would still have it potentially in one building. You could still have both, but they would be separate inventories, separate salespeople, separate point of sale systems, and separate entrances. So really that helps to control the under 21 issue, and then also really what of the two products are you buying. So most communities do allow co-location. So just kind of a little bit of what's happening in other communities that have allowed it. Another key piece tonight is land use spacing restrictions and the number of allowable locations. So the state has what we're referring to the minimum. So we could not allow them to be, we couldn't be any less restrictive than the state, but we could be more restrictive. So the state statute requires that the cannabis businesses be within 1,000 feet of a school, drug alcohol treatment center, or college or residential daycare. So we couldn't allow anything closer than that, but we could allow, or we could require further away. So we do have a sample in your packet of what several other communities have allowed, and Fort Collins, from what we understand, is one of the more restrictive communities. So we really want to show you what it would look like from the less restrictive side on the state statute, and then Fort Collins, which is more restrictive. So they're within 1,000 feet of a school, and they add in the playground, and 500 feet of the daycare, church, public park, 500 feet of a residential unit. So this really says wherever you have a residential unit, you have to have that 500 feet restriction. So we do have a map for you. So the yellow areas, this is a map of the city, would represent the state setbacks. So these would be areas where a cannabis business could go within the city of Evans within the state restrictions. And the blue hashed areas would represent if the city chose to use the same restrictions as Fort Collins, the areas that the cannabis businesses could go within the city. So you can see that it's quite a bit more restrictive, and there's a lot less areas that they could go into if the council decided to go with the Fort Collins type model.
And I think the key one there, as you mentioned, Jessica, is the residential unit. 500 feet. If council were to favor a restriction like that, that pretty much drives you to the blue hashed looking landscape.
Another consideration, hours of operation. The state does allow the businesses to operate between 8 a.m. and 12 a.m. Most of the communities that we sampled are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., so that would be something else to consider. On the licensing side, we talked a little bit more about this in January, but the council would need to consider whether you would want to do additional enforcement beyond what the state does. So basically, from a enforcement regulation perspective, the state is required to visit the facilities once a year, and they do that because they are required to do that. But the council made decide that they would like some of our own local enforcement, which would look like more frequent visits from the enforcement agency as the city, rather than relying on the state once a year. On the fee side, most communities have adopted a local operating fee. So there's kind of two pieces here. There's a new license fee, and automatically $2,500 of a $5,000 new licensing fee would come to the city from the state. The city is allowed to adopt a higher licensing fee and an annual operating fee. So those two really do need to be based on the cost of regulation enforcement from the city perspective. Our sample of other cities, the new license fee ranges from that $2,500 that's the standard with the state to $8,000, and there's a large range in the annual operating fees from $1,500 to $8,000 a year. So this would be a fee perspective that the council would need to consider. On the taxing side, we talked about this quite a bit more in January. Basically the same information. So the tax rate on the retail side for the state is 15%, and the 2.9% applies to the medical on the state side. And then the city, if the council decided not to ask for a tax increase, so the council could go to a vote of the residents and ask for a tax increase only on marijuana sales, it would be the 3.5%. So that would be how it would stand today. So what this would look like on a $100 sale on the retail side for the city is we would collect $3.50 from our regular city sales tax, and then the state would share back 10% of the total 15%, so that would be $1.50. So on a $100 sale, the city would get about $5 in sales tax revenue if you didn't go to a vote and increase that rate. So some things to think about from the tax side is, would you like to do a ballot question to increase the tax on it? And then also something important to consider will be whether you would like to restrict the revenue for a specific use, and also whether you would like to earmark it for maybe just one-time expenditures, or if you feel comfortable using that for ongoing services. So those are a few considerations on the revenue side.
So with that, I'll pick it up. Our recommended next steps, as I mentioned, would be to get out during the month of April, might get into May, on some town hall style meetings where we could share just a kind of draft of kind of straw man for what the council might be thinking about in this area, take some feedback on that. Then also during that time, if council's interested, we could schedule some tours of a couple of these establishments in the area. And then during June, we could come back with the feedback from the town hall meetings and some of these next level kind of policy questions. Again, we tried to kind of outline and tee up several of the questions, from enforcement strategies to taxes to hours of operation. We're certainly, we'd like to hear feedback from council direction, any of those. But I think for the town hall meetings, especially if the community could know kind of where the council stands on the type of businesses, if there's a limit on the number being contemplated, and the land use restrictions, how restrictive, and some of those questions, those would be most helpful. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jim. Just to answer, I'm just going to start with a few of those on the types. I'm okay with having both. I'm okay with having both in the same place. Let me start back up to say, like Jessica said, if you had asked her 10 years ago that this would be her last meeting, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would never be voting yes on marijuana. However, now I have straight. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. As far as types, I'm for both. I'm okay with them both being in the same place. However, I would only vote for it if it's over 21. I would not vote for 18-year-olds being able to get it. I work at a high school. I know it's pretty easy for them to get anyway. We just don't need to make it easier for them. That's how I feel on that one. Not sure what the number would be, but I do want to limit. Number 5 pops into my head as of right now, but I could be swayed on that. That's all I got. Mark?
If we were to go in this direction, my limit, I think, would be 2. I think, as the size of Evans is, I think anything more than that would probably be just an overkill. I would be in favor of more restrictive side of it. I definitely don't want anywhere near schools, daycare, churches, or any of those type of places. As far as the types, I'm okay with either or, but I would also agree with the mayor that 21. I mean, I know it's already pretty accessible for anybody, regardless of 18 or 21 or even under 18. It's still easy to get, but if we were to go that route, I would put it in definitely for the hours. I don't think anybody needs to be out buying marijuana at 10, 11, 12 at night. That usually just only means you're only getting into some kind of trouble. So I would be definitely in favor of the reduced hours if we were to go that direction.
I agree. I'm kind of at the number of 4 for being allowed here in this city. I kind of like Garden City's stance on that. I also don't want it near parks. I don't want anybody under 21 to be able to access it, although they can. You know, we all know how teenagers are. I think that we should definitely proceed with looking into this. I do have one question though, Jessica. Is there any, and this could be anywhere in the lovely state of Colorado or any of the other states that allow recreational pot, are there any cities that have the establishment that these pot shops are working out of? Are they their landlords at all? Do you understand what I'm saying? That wasn't very clear.
I don't.
Are there city-owned premises that are leased out for pot shop cannabis sales?
I do not
by
know.
The city, just leased.
I do know some of the codes that I read said it would not be on city property. Okay. So, and I am not familiar enough with the state statute that's this thick to know, to be able to tell you what the state says about that. But we could look into that. But there's definitely some cities that prohibit it on city property. So.
Okay. First question, I believe medical and the retail. The state allows that. That's what they voted on. One time they voted for the medical, then the next time it came up for retail, recreational. I would prefer that they be co-located. Means less facilities. I'm not going to put a number on how many facilities. If they meet the areas which we are looking at, I don't want them residential, so I believe the word was hashtagged. Would be okay with me. The only other restriction I'd like to see is like we do with liquor stores. You can't have them on top of each other. You have a space in between. I don't want one on the corner of 23rd Avenue and across the corner on 23rd Avenue. So, you know, proximity, not allowed. I like the more restrictive Fort Collins as far as where it can be sold and where it's not. I've been in Idaho Springs and they are everywhere. That's why I don't want to say put a number down as to how many, because if they think they can make enough money, then that's okay. Licensing, let the state do it. I don't think we have enough employees here that they can go in and do that. I would like to also see any taxes from it be earmarked for the police department, which is our largest budget area, and also where they're going to be the ones that have more interactions with those facilities. I think I hit them all.
Can we touch on that? I think we forgot the last part that you said. I mean,
it's not my fault.
I know. I'd like to see it for police and for streets.
Yeah, I would say for police and streets for sure.
Councilmember Neal?
Well, I've previously stated that since turning 18 and first being exposed to marijuana that I've been opposed to it. My stance on that has changed because I do believe there are some medical issues that can be helped by that, so I'd be in favor of maybe checking into medical. And of course, I would want the most restrictions and definitely earmark any revenue for what I'm sure would be an increased police presence needed and streets.
Okay, thank you. Member Castle.
I would say I'm echoing most. I'm in favor of both medical and retail. Co-located would be best. I would say for spacing restrictions, I would agree that the most restrictive is, yeah, it seems to be the best. For limit number, I mean, even based on the map, I think we're limiting it quite a bit. I would probably feel comfortable around the 2 or 3 mark. I don't know that there needs to be one on top of the other, but that may be addressed with what Council Member Finn said about having the proximity piece. So I would be okay with 2 to 3. Hours of operation, I agree, should be limited. Closed by 8 p.m. would be great. I think that's it. And I'm perfectly fine with it being restricted for streets and police. I think that's great. I would prefer to have it like that. I think it's easier to discuss why we think that's important. So,
Councilmember Johnson.
So I am also in favor for both medical and retail, also co-located, and then the more restrictive, which is like the Fort Collins kind of plan that they have. And as far as the limit, 2 to 4, but also getting input from our residents and seeing through the town halls and see what they think would also definitely give me guidance on the amount. And then 5 would be hours of operation. I'm more towards like 6 p.m. just because it kind of helps out throughout the year when, you know, it's when it gets darker and it's just a better time for me, for 8 to 6. And then also earmarking for the funds to the police department as well as streets.
Ask one quick question. How many times have we been approached or by outside entities to come in and open establishments in here? Has it been quite a few, or it's been pretty limited?
Since I've been here once in a serious way.
Probably once or twice.
Twice.
Before Jim's time.
I've had people that wanted to sell their buildings to interested parties, and it's very expensive to make it. Sure. So if they're willing to put that money into you know, the expense of securing a building, it's a rare thing.
I think one other question I had was, do we know if Garden City's met their max?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that kind of lends itself to businesses approaching Evans, and so I want to make sure if we do move forward with this, we've got the ability to have them come to us.
Jim, does that give you and your staff enough information to move forward?
If I may, since this is an important topic for communicating to the public, we're not making any decisions tonight. What I'm hearing in terms of a kind of majority consensus or template for us to share is in terms of type. Most council members are saying both, and they can be co-located. Not a clear consensus on number, but it ranges from 2 to 5. So that's something to kind of share. In terms of land use, I heard most are in favor of more restrictive rules similar to the Fort Collins. We would take the Fort Collins by name off of there, but if we were to share a concept for a more restrictive framework for land use, we would share those spacings up there, especially. And I think, again, if I'm hearing away from houses, from homes is important. Seeing heads nod. So that's how we would convey where we are today. And of course, the reason we're going out is to hear from the public and bring back some more feedback for your consideration.
Joe, I think it's also important to state what we propose to earmark.
Yes, I did also, thank you, Councilmember Spear. I also heard fairly strong consensus for earmarking the funding for police and streets.
Good? All right.
Right. Thank you.
Jessica, while you're here, don't have to go anywhere. You just stay right there. So for everyone out in the audience, this is Jessica Gonifas, our Deputy City Manager's last City Council meeting with us tonight. That is hard for me. She was the first person I met in the city when I got to be on City Council. I got to work with her over taxes over my restaurants, and I got to know her really well.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I was paying them all, by the way. That was not the problem. I've got to work close with Jessica on a lot of big items. I got to work really close with her on the wastewater treatment facility. I worked with her during the flood. A lot of the big things Evans has done, she's been a major part of, and this city has been so incredibly lucky to have you. And I just want to say, as a mayor, thank you for everything you've done. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I wish you nothing but the best in the future, and I'm personally going to miss you. And on behalf of the City Council, we went ahead and got you this. We would like to give you this. The City Council and tell you thank you very much.
Thank you.
And anyone else from council, if you have anything else to add.
Jessica, it's been a great pleasure working with you over these years I've been on council. You've stepped into a lot of roles and you've taken on a lot of projects, and you've done a fantastic job serving the people in the City Council of Evans as well. And we're going to miss you a lot, and we do really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Thank you.
And I don't know, I think the vase we gave you there has a little something on it, or?
Oh, yep. Back. Presented to Jessica Gonifas.
Other side.
In appreciation for your service and dedication to the city of Evans for the past 12 years. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Same thing. I can't say it any better than what Mayor Rudy said. It's been a pleasure having the privilege to work with you.
I agree.
Choked up.
I agree. You've been, I respect you immensely. You have been a stable for 12 years. You're very professional, responsible, and you will be missed.
Thank you.
I will definitely miss your accounting skills, bringing up or finding a lot of the things that are still on the books from years ago that were put there that never came to fruition. And I will definitely miss you. I hope you come back once in a while and say hi.
I think while my time on City Council has been minimal, I have known you longer than anybody, and I'm pretty sure I've worked with you the full 12 years. I think that the things that you have brought to this city are just of the utmost, source of professionalism. You have really taken pride in everything you do, and I think what gives me comfort as you start this new journey is knowing that you have helped train those around you. I know that I'm sure Jackie is very grateful, and she's done a great job, and I know that a lot of that is due not only to her success, but your success in helping to train and develop those around you. The city was incredibly lucky to have you, and you will be sorely missed, but personally, I'm very excited for you, and I wish you nothing but the best.
I echo everyone's sentiments towards you. You have worn so many hats, and you've stepped up to the plate in the time of need that that Evans needed. And you've been there. You've been through every single aspect, within your time 12 years. And you've been great. You do great at your job. You care. You far exceeded, your every single role you've been in, and filled in interim. And I'm grateful, and I thank you for everything. And again, I've been here for a little over 2 years, and you've been amazing. Good luck. I wish you the best. It's bittersweet. I'm happy but sad all at the same time.
Jessica, thanks again for everything. We really appreciate you. We do have some refreshments and a cake, I believe, over in the corner there. So we have 15 minutes to celebrate with you, Jessica, and then we're going to get back to work.
Everyone's welcome.
Nope, we're skipping it. Nope, we're skipping it.
Skipping it?
Yep.